This episode of Instant Speed Podcast is brought to you by Kayfabe Cards. Located in Utah, Kayfabe Cards is a smart choice for all of your flesh and blood needs. Prepare for the battles you'll face through the world of Wraith by gearing up at kayfabecards.com. That's KAYFABECARDS.com and get all of the cards shipped directly to your door. Hey, if Magic or Pokemon is your jam, they've got you covered. Kayfabe Cards has a plethora of TCG options, sealed products, and singles to keep you collecting and keep you competitive. Kayfabe Cards, be who you want to be. This is the Instant Speed Podcast, episode number 72. Our guest today is Matt Rogers. And as always, this episode is brought to you by Kayfabe Cards. All right, let's get to the facts, because the Calling in Auckland wrapped up this past weekend, not without its controversy, which we will get into this episode. But it was ultimately won by Sam Sutherland on Dash, taking out Lexi. Want to know what the meta looked like going into day two? Here's a chart to give you a little bit of an idea of the heroes that were strong enough to get through that first round of Swiss. All right, we've got Matt Rogers. We dig into this one real deep. It's a long one, friends, but every word spoken has some poignancy. So stay tuned. It's Matt Rogers talking about the feature match at the Calling. ISP is proudly supported by BCW Supplies. Yeah, all my cards, they fit snugly into a perfect fit, and then we slide them right into an Elite 2 sleeve. Those cards, hey, well, they're resting easy and protected in my Deck Vault 100. Ooh, it's a nice one. Well, all of my spiciest gems, well, they're on display in my Z Folio LX. Yeah, you could treat your collection with love by going to bcwsupplies.com. Use the code ISP10. Get 10% off all of your orders. Oh, yeah. And hey, maybe cards might not be your only thing. Are you into coins, comics? Maybe you want to show off your record collection? They've got you covered. Use the code ISP10 at checkout for 10% off your BCW Supplies purchases. BCW Supplies. Protect, store, display. The Instant Speed Podcast welcomes back a name synonymous with flesh and blood. He is a former champion, most recently finishing in the top 8 at the Calling in Auckland, New Zealand. He is the founder of PCG Grading and currently a top 4 finalist in the Goliath Gauntlet 2, which I think is probably the biggest feather in your cap, Matt Rogers. Can I say that that's correct?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that event is just, yeah, the epitome. It's the top. It's the prestige. You know, only the only the best players get to play in that one. So
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, just kudos to whoever runs that. It's amazing series.
It's kind of a clown car of idiots that are all kind of fiddling with knobs and trying to control the radio while trying to get to a destination at the same time, and magically we're on our way there. We got there the first time, so we're trying to struggle to get our way there. But Matt Rogers, it's a pleasure to have you back on the show. And I mean, part of this is going to be, we're going to talk a little bit about meta. We're going to talk a little bit about PCG grading, but there is a gigantic non-elephant in the room, because I don't think that's not what it is. We want to talk a little bit about what happened in Auckland at the Calling in Auckland, but I have a very important question to get to first. I get this sometimes. Everybody knows me as Flake. I very rarely get called Matt. Are you Matt or Matthew?
I'm Matt. I think maybe my mom and maybe one or two other people ever call me Matthew. Everybody calls me Matt. I've always been known as Matt. Yeah.
Okay, that's kind of where I'm coming from. My family, like my blood relatives, call me Matthew. My friends that I grew up in high school call me Matt. Everybody else calls me Flake, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I think the question I get the most often is when I'm meeting someone or interacting with them, and they'll just refer to me as Flake, and they're like, "Is that okay? Can I call you that?" I'm like, "Bitch, I've been called that for 20 something years. Since I was 13, I've been Flake." So It's all good.
Do you sometimes accidentally introduce yourself as Flake to like people, like in, I don't know, normal professional world or something like that, or like family, friends or anything?
I don't. It's
You don't?
always
Okay.
on the tip of my tongue though, because that's mostly how I'm known. And if you ever see me stream, a lot of what I do is I'll say, I'm like, Flake ain't falling for that one. Like I'll always refer to myself in the third person that way. But if somebody comes up to me, or if I'm at a match and I'm playing against somebody, I'll usually sit down. I'll have their name on like the Gem app. I'll be like, Erica or Jeremy or whatever. I say, nice to meet you. And they're like, what's your name? I say, I always introduce myself as Matt. That's basically how it goes. And then somebody usually just lets the cat out of the bag. They're like, that's Flake. And I'm like, you say it like it's a detriment. I'm like, screw off. Flake. I'm Flake, damn it. I'm Flake.
Yeah, you got to own that. You are Flake. That's you.
I can't be anything but Flake. That's kind of where we're at. So the major thing that we are here to discuss, obviously, is the fact that there was a lot of controversy that occurred with your match at the Calling in Auckland. Yeah. And we're going to dig into that. But before we do, I just want to sort of take a macroscopic look at the Calling in Auckland, because watching it from afar on this side of the pond, as it were, the venue looked so damn cool.
It was to be honest, when we heard about the venue change to do with the floods, I think a lot of people's immediate reaction is like, what, we're going to be playing this game on a stage in a theater, like the Civic. It's like not anything you would ever even think about relating to card games, right? Like, this is where like the opera's held and like theater and everything like that. So we're like, man, this is going to be so weird. But getting there, I mean, the building is incredible. It's such a, historic, like, wow, like just everything about it is really quite cool. And it kind of set a bit of a mood. It did mean that parts of the venue were quite dark, and that was frustrating as well. But specifically for PCG, we were set up in a vendor area where there was like almost no lights, because it's supposed to always be dark, and we're using these side lights. And it made things quite difficult. And the vendors expressed similar things. But in terms of like the event on the stage there, that was lit up well, and everything to do with that, and just kind of being in the atmosphere of that really cool place. It was cool to play an event there.
It seemed awesome. And again, I've had events in really cool venues before. This seemed to be one of those. And I remember, as I tweeted out to the once the picture came out through the FabTCG Twitter account, I said, I'm like, are those theater seats, like, are you able to sit there and just chill out? They're like, yeah, absolutely. I said, yeah, damn, like that is so freaking cool. We're getting slowly closer to my ultimate vision of having a match in a wrestling ring with fans holding signs and throwing stuff. Like that's,
oh my gosh,
we're inching towards it, man. All right. So everybody wants to know, and again, obviously this is a big conversation point, which was what the F happened at your particular match versus Hayden Dale. And I want to set a few things. I want to set up a few ducks before we get into this discussion, because when I announced that you were the guest, I got a lot of feedback and a lot of questions and a lot of comments from people regarding this particular episode and this particular recording. And I want to address, of course it's fair, because people, they give a damn, and they give a damn about the integrity of the game and such. And they give a damn also about, thankfully for me, and it's very flattering, but they care about the integrity of this program. And that means a lot to me as well. So I'm going to address a few things. Number one, you and I are good friends. I've never shied away from that. And that's the heart of the matter, is that you and I are friends. You are on the show before, you'll be on the show in the future, barring any catastrophe. What occurred was not a catastrophe. That's the first thing that I want to say. The second thing is that to the people who treat my show like I'm Anderson Cooper doing an investigative, like, this isn't investigative journalism. There's only so much I can get to with the time that I have. And I spoke to, obviously I'm speaking to you. I spoke to you prior. I spoke to Hayden and I spoke to Josh Scott, the rules and policy manager, about this particular situation. That is the best I can do with the limited amount of time I have, because this wrapped up on Sunday and it's Tuesday and I have a life outside of this, and I'm doing my best. That's the other thing.
You do?
Shut up.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's a fruitful life, but it's a life. And finally, to the people who are like, somebody actually said, I need to interview witnesses. I'm like, dude, this isn't Dateline NBC. That's not happening. Okay. We're going to discuss this from the perspectives that I have. I have a quote from Josh and I have a quote from Hayden, and we're going to have this conversation. So I want to clear the air on that. So if people think I have an agenda here, that I'm here to blindly support or deny people, I support everybody in their endeavors to improve. And what you're here to do is to express your side of the story, because I honestly feel that you're getting a raw deal here. And beyond that, also just, give yourself a platform that you can express your side of the story and just put to bed some of perhaps the bits and pieces that people aren't necessarily aware of, but they want to hear it. I don't have an opinion on this.
I appreciate it.
It's my responsibility as a friend of yours and as somebody who believes in this game and the integrity of this game, that if there's a disagreement or there's a confusion, that it's worth discussing, and that's what we're here to do. So, I'm going to ask you some questions. I've run some of them by you prior, and you said you're comfortable answering all of them. So
I'm just gonna start this by saying I'm comfortable answering anything. I'm an open book here. I'm not gonna shy away from anything. If people are gonna take the answers and stuff as they are, but from my experience in these situations, it's best to just be honest and transparent and put everything out there.
Okay. So
you can ask me whatever you want, whether you've run it past me before or not, anything that you've added, anything like that, just feel free, just ask me.
Okay. And I appreciate that. And you've always been candid before, and you'll be candid here, and that's what matters. The first thing I want to ask you is, what went wrong in that game, specifically from your end? Because what I've viewed in that match was, obviously you're playing a style of deck that I have played for the past couple days as well, and I have played in the past in different variations, which is control to the degree of fatigue, getting your opponent's threats out of the way before you can turn a corner and ultimately find your own win condition. That usually happens in the 40th through 50th minute. It is a long process. So with that in mind, what were the challenges and pitfalls of that particular match you were playing?
So the way I approach the Icelander matchup is, I know that we are going through a lot of turns, like a ridiculous amount of turns. The usual way that game ends is when they we've gone through multiple cycles at our deck. My deck is 10 or so cards because I've blocked every single avenue I possibly can. I've discarded cards to Coronet Peak where I can. I've banished things away with Art of War. I've done everything I can to just get cards out of my deck so that I'm more likely to draw Warhorn faster. So it gets to a point where my deck is very small and their deck is very small, and they run out of cards to be able to block me, or they combo me and I die. And generally I spend the whole game keeping my life total as high as I can and trying to get as many cards out of my deck ready for the second cycle as I can. So you'll see, when he's coming in with Wounded Bulls, sometimes with E-strikes and stuff, I'm throwing 3 cards in front of there. I'm sinking and I'm baiting and I'm constantly putting things to the bottom and Crown of Seeds and draw a card as often as I can. I'm trying to churn through my deck as fast as possible. You'll notice that when he Coronet Peaks me, I usually discard a card rather than pitch a card, because I just want cards out of my deck. So we went through countless turns, all of the motions of that. There was Warhorn, everything like that, and basically came to a turn where I was starting to turn the corner. I have to turn the corner in the late game, right? So throughout the game, what I want to do is take very little damage and keep my life total high and just be popping his hexes with the Warhorns. Once I pop all 3 hexes, he is going to Remembrance and put the hexes back in his deck. This is the spot where I have to pivot and I have to make him pay a big cost to resolve each of these hexes, right? I have to be coming in with big attacks and really put the pressure on him so that he has to keep blocking me, and he can't set up 3 turns of playing hexes and then 2 turns of doing the combo, giving me a bunch of frostbites and whatnot, right? So my aim at that point is to stop his 5 turns of set up and kill. So I turn the corner at that point, and I want to go super aggressive. So that turn. So the turn before, I play out my first channel lake to set me up to be able to do that. So that when I come in super aggressive, like I've kept all 3 Terra Sunders in my deck at this point. And the most important thing I want to try to do after he remembrances is to Terra Sunder him, because the way that I win is that I get rid of as many cards as possible, so that he can't play out these frost hexes and doesn't have enough cards to block me when he does, that he can actually combo me. So Terra Sunder is one of the most important cards for me in the late game, and he knows this as well, and he knows that I have 3 Terra Sunders in my deck. So I go to turn the so I set up the Channel Lake Frigid so that I can kind of do my big turn mostly uninterrupted. And then I start on my turn. I play Art of War from my arsenal. And I think the biggest thing about this, and the biggest thing that people need to realize is I'm actually playing Terra Sunder wrong, Art of War wrong. I've played Art of War wrong this entire tournament. I've been playing Art of War wrong for a long time. Now, that doesn't mean I've just been drawing 2 cards for free every time, but I have been resolving the card wrong. And if you go back into the video, you see the first time I play Art of War, you'll see it. You'll see the second time I play Art of War, you'll see it. I've been resolving Art of War like E-Strike and like Crown of Seeds, where I banish as part of the cost, right? Before the Calling, I only played a handful of games with this deck with Art of War in it. Nick put Art of War into the deck last minute. I picked it up and changed to it. I was going to play Dash. I changed to Guardian the week of the Calling, and I played very few games because I don't play on Talishar. I've got nobody here to play that I play with. I don't play Armories. I've got way too much going on in life, so I just didn't really get to play any games. So I kind of forgot how Art of War works and thought that Banish was part of the cost. So if you go back into the video versus Hayden, you'll see on maybe one of the earlier turns in the game, I cast Art of War, I pay my 1 resource, I cast Art of War, I banish Glacial Footsteps, I name +1, and then I wait for him to respond. So I banished before the card is resolved.
So I just want to sort of just clarify one thing. So because a lot of people don't realize this aspect, and this is a part that again, this is not something that beginners will know. This is not something that intermediates or average players will know either. For example, like you mentioned, this is what I think like for the context and for to properly set up this conversation, people need to understand that when you're talking about the resolving of Art of War, the way that it's played, that a lot of people might not know, is that when you play Art of War, you play it and name your modes, and then you wait for the response. And it's not, like you said, like E-Strike, where you play the card and resolve the cost. The modes that you select are not resolved until your opponent passes priority back, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct. So yeah, you'll see, like anybody can see in the video, my Glacial is banished the whole time that he's thinking about whether he wants to respond to the Art of War. And the Art of War is just sitting on there with a +1 dice to show the modes, banish, draw 2 and +1. And then when he finally lets it resolve, I draw my 2 cards like I always do. The second time, and the time in question, when I cast Art of War, I did the same thing. You'll see on screen. I paid my resource. I played Art of War. I went to banish Macho Grande, and Hayden stopped me, and he was like, "No, don't banish. I want to respond." And that's when I realized, oh, okay, yeah, that's right. That's how that works. And then he responded by playing the thing from his arsenal, drawing a card, creating a frostbite, and then waning mooning me, and then I'm thinking about whether I want to pitch to waning moon, and all of that's gone on, right? So I prevent the 3 from the waning moon, and then he finally lets the Art of War resolve, and then I just draw my 2 cards like I did when I played my last Art of War, like I've been doing. So obviously, yeah, it's not great. It's not what you want to happen, but it is an honest mistake, and it is. I'm obviously very sorry that it happened, and I know that people that are watching the stream and stuff, they want to see competitive play. They want to see the proper things happen and games play out. So I'm sorry. I know that I've disappointed a few people, and I know that it's not. It's not to the level that people would come to expect.
So how long up to that point had you been playing that day?
So that was round 3 of the day. So we played, so we played 7 rounds the day before, and then that was round 3 of day 2.
Okay, I've played 7 rounds. By round 6, I'm dead. Like, I'm tired.
Yeah.
I go, the end of the day and whatnot, and there's a lot of it's in your neighborhood, I guess, and to the degree of like you're not traveling terribly far. But I do understand how brain mush can happen, even for pros. That said, that's not an excuse necessarily. It's merely the reality that you are going to make mistakes. And I understand that because Hayden made mistakes as well. Because Hayden waning mooned you when he was not able to pay for it. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I think one thing, and I think it actually makes a really good example. I love Hayden. He's incredible. He's a massive stand-up guy, and I know that but like he makes mistakes too, right? Like he is one of the better players in this game, and he makes mistakes too. And I think what people haven't seemed to bring up too much is he actually made 3 game rule infractions that game, and that just goes to show how much the top players still make mistakes when playing fast. So Hayden actually at about turn 5, he waning mooned me without paying for it, and we caught it afterwards, and they rewound, and then he paid for it. So that was like the first one. And then on the, obviously there was the big mess term with the Channel Lake frigid and everything like that. So he didn't pay for Channel Lake there. And then even later on in the game, after I played my second Channel Lake, Hayden just pitched 1 card and only paid 3 instead of 4 to Coronet peak me. And then I was thinking for a little while on which card which card to discard, and then we caught it, and then like we didn't want another whole big mess on stream or whatever, so like I just said pitch another card, and then he was happy with that, I was happy with that, so the judge was happy with that, so he just pitched another card, and we moved on. So like that's the thing that I really do want to express, is that every player maybe not if your name's Michael Hamilton, but just the guy's not really human. But every other player makes mistakes, and a lot of them. When you're playing fast and there's this much information going on, and you have to think about your opponent's pitch stack, your pitch stack, everything that's going to happen in the next 5, 6, 7 turns, etc. How you're going to win the game, how you're going to navigate through things. There is a lot of information in this game. Far more than any game I've ever played before, and when you're trying to process all of that information and strategize and plan around all of that information at speed, mistakes are going to happen, and they're going to happen constantly.
So let me ask you this then: who caught the mistake that ultimately resulted in a dual IP2?
So I'm not sure. I think it was somebody on the Sushi Night or a spectator said something about banish a card with Art of War, or that it hadn't been banished or whatever. I looked down at my banish, I looked at my cards, and I'm like, oh crap. And I'm like, okay, I haven't banished a card with Art of War. And then like I said that to Hayden, I'm like, look, I haven't banished a card with Art of War. All of the judges, like 6 of them or something, were off in a corner already talking about like the Channel Lake situation or whatever. And Hayden's like, oh crap, yeah. And he's like, well, yeah, do you want to call it? And I'm like, yeah, I'll call it. And so I call the judge over, and I'm like, look, unfortunately, there's a bit more for you guys to discuss. I also haven't banished to my Art of War here. And so then everything continued, and they went straight back into the tank and into the thing with Josh Scott and everybody talking about what's going to happen from here.
So
the situation, the investigation around it.
So once it was essentially brought to your attention, either by a spectator or whatever, once you were caught wind of the infraction that you made, you called a judge.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I heard it out of the corner of my ear. I heard somebody say something about banish a card, and that prompted me to check my banish zone. And then I told Hayden about it. And I mean, Hayden did say, do you want to call it? So I called it. But yeah, either way, we were going to call it. Yeah, of course.
Okay. So, I mean, that's what I'm trying to, that's what I want to get at, is that it was a decision made by yourself and or Hayden both together to obviously get a judge in to catch wind of what occurred and ultimately put the fate of that turn and whatever the consequences were in their hands, correct?
Yeah, correct. I mean, anytime anything goes wrong in a game,
right,
like you call a judge, like that's
right.
Just part of the game.
So that's that. Yeah. This is what I just want to sort of clarify, is that if you were looking to pull one over on somebody, you wouldn't invite the judge over to review your own infraction, right? Like, this
I think realistically at that time when it's called, and I've talked to Hayden about it, I would. I think anybody would, even if they were trying to pull one over, because by that point it's gone.
This is part of what I'm trying to get at, is the fact that it doesn't line up. The fact that if you were to make an infraction and you were the one to call the judge on your own infraction, how, like, you're either the world's stupidest cheater or you were not in the intention of trying to gain an advantage in that degree. Now, all this to say, the decision for the penalties that were dished out, whether somebody feels them fair or unfair, did you have any influence over what that decision was?
No. We both, myself and Hayden, spent a long time debating with judges. I mean, we wanted a rewind. We felt that was the fairest thing. The judges felt that too many things had happened to rewind the game state, and that they weren't really open to a rewind of the game state. So yeah, ultimately it was up to them. Like we're just players.
Right. So I have a quote from Josh Scott. Like, I spoke to Josh about it. Josh spoke to me, and thank you very much to Josh Scott for taking the time. I think it's his birthday today as well, Josh Scott. So happy birthday to you, Josh. Awesome human being. So thank you very much.
We actually did a big happy birthday for him at the event. Now, cupcakes and everything.
Did you really? You had cupcakes?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Like, I wanted to go to the Calling in Auckland. It just didn't line up. It costs money to get on an airplane, so that's kind of part of like.
And I mean, when I say we, I mean the judge team. I don't want people watching this video and be like, "Oh, is Matt bribing judges with cupcakes now as well?" I had nothing to do with it. But I obviously sung "Happy Birthday" with everybody else.
Yeah, here comes the exactly. Here comes the next set of memes, being that you show up with just like cupcakes loaded with sedatives just to give to the judge team. So here's what Josh said about this, that he said he was comfortable being quoted on. He said, Hayden had a gameplay infraction for not paying the additional resource cost for Channel Lake Frigid. Halfway through the call, it was discovered also, this is what you're talking about, the huddle they have, I guess, that Matt had a gameplay infraction for not banishing a card for Art of War. The head judge decided not to back up the game. That was the head judge's decision, and issued both players an IP2. Again, the head judge's decision. So this went all the way up to the head judge of the tournament. The total time for this was 10 minutes. That is what Josh said. Again, those are all facts that he has essentially confirmed and corroborated with his judge team, as this is what happened. That said, how do you feel this should have went down? What would your ideal scenario be to rectify this situation that, frankly, you had a very big part in you had them, like, I'm not saying that Hayden is in the clear here. He had his own set of infractions in the game. You also had a pretty egregious one ultimately. How do you feel is a proper rectification of this?
Yeah. Okay. So, so everything that Josh said, I agree with there as well, except for I think the call was a lot more than 10 minutes, but whatever, that's just, semantics, whatever here or there.
10 New Zealand minutes. Yeah, that's the 10 New Zealand,
10 New Zealand minutes. Yeah, like it's hard for me to say, right? Because I'm a player. I'm not a judge. Like this is, this is the guy that literally writes the rules and policy for this game. So I'm never ever going to argue with him. I debated and gave what I thought. Ultimately, I thought that there could have been a rewind, and we could have wound things back. As it comes to IP2, whether they should have been issued or not, it's hard. I think, like, end of the day, like, I drew 2 cards, I can get an advantage, I should probably get an IP2, right? Like, I agree with that. End of the day, Hayden was able to wane and moon me without paying an extra card to do it. End of the day, that gives him an advantage. He probably should get an IP2. It was the second time he hadn't paid for Waning Moon that game. The judges had to bring everything into it, right? And I had a couple of previous infractions earlier in the event as well. So, like, ultimately, I should get an IP2. The judges should be giving me a punishment that says, you need to be more careful. I don't care if you're playing fast. We're gonna add a punishment that forces you to be a lot more careful. I think ultimately, like, I hate that the IP2s came out because they kind of ruined things. But ultimately, maybe they didn't have another choice. I guess additionally, I would say, like, to me, the rewind just kind of made sense because the information wasn't that big. I know there was a Tear Asunder play and everything like that, and that's a lot of information, but realistically, Hayden knew that was my game plan. He knew this was a turn that I was almost certainly going to Tear Asunder him. Like, that would be the game plan on this turn, right? That's why I've kept 3 Tear Asunders in my deck. That's why I'm Art of Warring this turn. Like, ultimately, like, he's smart enough to know that was what was going to happen. If we had rewound, we would come to almost the exact same game state, but then everything's done properly, right? So I think one thing that quite a few people that have kind of gotten up in arms about the situation might have missed is that the game state doesn't actually really change. So what happens is Hayden can't Wane and Moon me, so I never have to pitch the Macho Grande to prevent the 3 damage, right? So that Macho Grande just ends up in my banish. And then I still cast Tear Asunder, I cast Chokeslam. The exact same sort of thing happens there. It's just that instead of Macho Grande being pitched to pay 3 for the Waning Moon, it is instead banished. Right. And he's never going to pay an extra card to Waning Moon me there because then he knows that. So he's got 2 Frost Hexes in hand as well. So he can never pitch to Waning Moon, because if he pitches to Waning Moon, I effectively win the game on the spot. So if he pitches another whole card to Waning Moon me there, I can still pitch the Macho Grande. I can pay the 3, prevent the Waning Moon, and then just banish Debilitate. Then he only has 3 cards in hand. So then I pop Epot and Tunic, I Tear Asunder, and I Chokeslam him. And then no matter what, he has to discard a Frost Hex. He either has to block with it or discard it. That Frost Hex is gone, right? And when that Frost Hex is gone, he loses 1 or 2 Frost Hexes there, but either way, he doesn't have enough to kill me anymore. There's no way he can put together a game state where I die if he loses one of those Frost Hexes there. So if he pays the extra card for Waning Moon, I win the game. And if he pitches the Frost Hex as well, it goes to the bottom of the deck, which means he's not going to have enough time to set up again, which means he'll fatigue himself before he can combo me. So it's again, I would win the game in that spot.
Right. So. But in that particular, snapshot of what that turn was, if there was a rewind and the rules were adhered to, now, obviously you say, I would have banished this, I would have pitched this, I would have whatever. Now, whoever wins or loses is not what's in question here. And ultimately, it's that particular turn that everybody wants more clarity on, more insight on.
Yeah.
Are you how do I properly phrase this? Like, you said that, like, if it didn't go down that way, I would have 100% banished that Macho Grande. And I would have done it. Like if he didn't waning moon you, I'm banishing the Macho Grande. I'm drawing my cards, blah, 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 blah. Why should we believe you that that was the intent ultimately, that that had he not waning mooned you, you wouldn't have just kept that card and draw 2 anyways?
What do you mean? Sorry.
Okay, so you mentioned that.
Oh, as in okay.
So had it been played by the letter, and Hayden chose not to waning moon you, based on the premise that he wants to maintain his hand because he needs those cards anyways, and you are then your Art of War resolves. You have played Art of War. You have selected draw card and I don't know what the other one, buff +1 or whatever.
Draw 2 cards and +1, yeah.
Draw 2 cards +1. That's the option. Yeah. That is what you've said. You still have all the cards otherwise in your hand. Hayden Hayden passes his priority back to you. What the question is with the priority back to you, in that previous circumstance, you just drew 2 cards because you pitched the Macho Grande to Waning Moon.
Yeah.
Why should we believe that you wouldn't have just drawn those 2 cards without actually banishing the card? It seems like a ridiculous thing to state, but it's worth asking because the reality is that you didn't. Obviously, the circumstances are changed, but if that particular turn was played by the letter of the law, that was another juncture for you perhaps to have not banished the card and still draw 2, because like you said, it's been a long day. You've played for your second straight day. The game is going into the 11th hour of this particular matchup. You guys are hustling to find a resolution to this. Does that brain fog not just create another equal scenario where you're like, you just do it anyways? Was that mistake still on the stack to resolve anyways, regardless of what happened prior to that?
I think the difference is there. If we looked at the clock back, is that if Hayden hadn't have responded to me, right, and just let me banish the card, because you can see me on the camera try to banish that Macho Grande, Hayden actually stops me. So if he wasn't responding to me, then I would just banish the Macho and draw 2 cards. That was what was going to happen if he didn't want to respond. So it was the response and playing an ice card out of Arsenal and giving me a frostbite and stuff that kind of changed everything, because he stopped me from banishing the card, right? It was partly because I was resolving Art of War incorrectly.
Okay. There's no debate here that both of you made pretty egregious errors in the
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that is not for debate, and I don't think that anyone's disagreeing with you here. I think that the problem here is people believe intent to be malicious, and that's why I asked you. And in the video, like you said, you do see that when you're making the play, you are motioning towards the banishment of that card as per the letter of the law of how the card should be played. And I think that that's important to also point out.
Not as to the letter of the law of how the card, because I was doing it like E-strike.
Well, right. Right. Exactly.
Yes, you can see me go to banish it there like it's E-strike or whatever, like that's part of the cost. And then Hayden stops me and says, no, I want to respond, counter your modes.
Yeah, so you screwed up in a different way. You
I'm screwing up left, right, and center.
Well, you parlayed one error into a more condemning one ultimately.
But that's generally what happens in card games too, though. Like you definitely, you will see that a lot in competitive card games. You make one error, and then because of that error, your opponent makes an error, and then you make another big error, because your whole brain just goes, oh no, what's going on? Everything goes fuzzy, and then your opponent's like, I didn't expect that, and then they make some impulsive decision in response, and then errors tend to lead to more errors. That's what I've always found in card games.
Yeah, it's like tilt, man. Like if you make an error and you get tilted, that essentially just pollutes the rest of your turns in the future, and that's not a good thing. So the question about what did I think about what would have been a fair ruling on this? This is actually a question I got from multiple sources. One of them was from Team Galaxy Brain. Another one was from Cale McCreath, asking, what would have been a fair ruling in your opinion? And I think you answered that previously, but there is a follow-up from Cale saying, do you think that Hayden got a raw deal out of this? And did you ever contemplate conceding as a way, as maybe, this is not him saying. His question, letter for letter, is: would you agree that Hayden got a raw deal on this? If so, did you contemplate conceding? That was the question from Cale McCreath. And I guess if you felt like he was getting a raw deal, is that something you would have done? I don't know.
Yeah. So that's quite an interesting question. In terms of the whole thing, I think the whole situation sucks, and I do think that Hayden got a very bad situation. Like, it was worse for Hayden than it was for me. An IP2 for Icelander when they're trying to combo you out to finish the game, versus an IP2 for Oldham when you don't really need all 4 cards every turn if they're not burning you anyway. It's definitely worse for Icelander than it is for Oldham. I think Hayden got a raw deal out of that. But at the same time, like, that is kind of the way the rules work. Like, Hayden said to me, when the judges were over thinking, he said to me that that's what he expected, right? Like, Hayden said the words to me, he's like, "This is not good for me, man." And I'm like, he's like, "I know how this ruling works, and it's going to screw me," And end of the day, like, that if you do something that gains you an advantage and they can't rewind it or whatever, or even if they can, I'm not 100% clear on the rules, but like, if you do something that gains you an advantage, you get an IP2. Like, that's just kind of how it works. But like, it's a hard spot, right? Like, I think my position in that game is good, but Hayden might have thought otherwise. I'm really not sure. I think, like, my game plan worked out the exact way I wanted it to. I stayed really high life. I killed his 3 Frost Hexes. He shuffled them back in, and I turned the corner. And I turned the corner with still 2 red Glacial Footsteps in my deck, Rouse, my Terra Sunders, everything in a very small deck, which means I should be able to present enough damage each turn that he can't he can't do the kill, right? He should be 1 or 2 turns off from being able to actually kill me. So from my point of view, whether this happened or not, I feel I was in a really good spot in that game. From what I've heard and from talking to him after the match and stuff, I think he thought the same thing from his side as well. Like, the game went as he planned. I killed the Frost Hexes. He got to remembrance them back. He knew how to set up his end game. So I really don't know how the game actually plays out. I was reasonably confident I would win, but he seemed reasonably confident that maybe he would too. So I have no idea. I think whether I should concede in that spot, like, I think definitely sometimes it is valid that, like, if you get an advantage that you shouldn't have gotten and you were going to lose that game, then I think it's absolutely appropriate to be able to to concede to your opponent in that spot and be like, "Look, the way the forces have worked and the way this has played out, it's not fair on you. It's not fair on anything that's not in the spirit of how this game is." But I don't think this was quite one of those cases for me.
So that leads to. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah. I think I was done. Yeah.
So this leads to an interesting conversation, because you said that in this case, it was, if the ruling was unfair, then it's perfectly within the realm of plausibility to concede to somebody, because should the ruling be unfair. But this is a ruling that came from the head judge. So this.
Yeah. Well, I think and I will add that just in that spot, I think it's reasonable to concede if you were going to lose the game. Like, if you were going to lose the game and the ruling from a mistake that you made ends up putting you in a spot where you win the game, then I think it can be fair to concede. But if it's if you weren't going to lose the game and and the ruling is from something that they've done, then I don't think it's usually appropriate to.
It's called failing upward. It's what I rely on my whole life. So that then sort of begs the question: if rulings can be unfair, does the rule book need to be revised? Because like you mentioned, if there's a situation, let's say, where, like you mentioned, your opponent was in had the inevitability of victory, and an error that you caused punishes both players, but by consequence of that ruling, that IP, that, whatever. Now, for those who don't know, IP2 means intellect penalty 2, which means for 2 turns, you are getting 1 less card. So I wanted to clear that up because not everyone might know what IP is. If you have an IP2 and your opponent has an IP2, like you mentioned, Oldham could do a lot more swinging a hammer than with, or having one fewer card than, let's say, Icelander does. That said, does this not beg the question that maybe the rules are a little bit wonky, that if you can be put into a better position based off your own infraction, that maybe the ruling system should have some sort of contingency, some sort of safety net to prevent that from happening? Is inevitability of a victory enough to override what a ruling can be?
Yeah, this is so hard for me to comment on. I mean, I'm going to try to, as I said, I'm an open book here, but like, it's such niche scenarios that could ever come up that a ruling can be, this way purely your fault, right? Like realistically, end of the day, Hayden got an IP2 because of something that he did wrong, right? So this, and I got an IP2 because of something that I did wrong. So like maybe, those two things are fair on the way the rules work. I'm not sure if the IP system is flawed. I guess you're asking me if I think the IP system is flawed.
Well, and not necessarily just the IP system in isolated. It just so happens that this particular example is such that the IP favored one player over the other. Now, you're stating that the inevitability was in your favor. You had things lined up, and I can't speak to yes or no. I don't know. I wasn't in that position. It's a high level game. You and Hayden.
I can't be certain, but that's what I'd come to in my mind. Yeah.
That said, just the rulings in general, because if that's the case, and like I told you, I'm going to ask you some pointed questions here.
Yeah.
You're a smart guy in this game. If you understand that you can lock this game down based off the clock also pressuring you, would it not kind of lean to the degree that, hey, if I can squeeze an IP for both of us, that accelerates my game plan and prevents my opponent for 2 turns to actually convert on stuff? Wouldn't that lead people to sort of believe that, hey, Matt Rogers is a smart guy. He understands the game and understands the rules, and sure, there's fatigue and everything, but if you identify that an IP2 for everybody benefits me because I can get to my end game faster and you can't, wouldn't it be okay for people to suspect that maybe this was part of the plan?
Yeah, I mean, this is going pretty deep on, I guess,
I know, but
conspiracy or something like that. But
I'm trying to reconcile what a lot of people out there are just heralding, which is that that this was intentional, that this was like a snake kind of move and such, and when in reality it was 2 players. Now I'm presenting both sides of the fence here as best as I can.
I understand.
Yeah,
I think ultimately I would have to have some sort of voodoo magic to like get my opponent to not pay for their waning moon. I think ultimately, like in your scenario, I am doing something that makes him not pay for the channel lake, right? So, I don't know. That's really hard for me to comment.
No,
on.
I understand.
Like, I can't really understand that logic because like he's the one, playing out his cards or whatever. I can't make him forget about a channel lake unless I've got, maybe you can go back to the video and maybe somebody would see me doing some sort of like misdirection thing to get him to look the other way and not see my channel lake or something like that. And then maybe you can, we can delve in there or whatever. But I think ultimately like, that's
just do one of these where you're like, oh, it's the Whoa! Right behind your ear. Gotcha.
Hey, look at that. Hey, that was. Oh, I have no idea how you did that. that was actually behind my ear. Like, wow.
Hey, wasn't that good? I know. Anyways, like again, I'm trying to do this as much justice as possible, and I know that there's going to be a lot of people who are unsatisfied with the questions that I'm leading to, and I said I'm going to be flat out here. This isn't unbiased journalism I'm doing here. I don't believe that there was any ill intent. You both made mistakes, and it was both a pretty sloppy game, frankly. And I'm not on that level, and the majority of players who are watching this and commenting this are also not on that level. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to pull the curtain back and ask some questions to just maybe put a little bit more context that people don't necessarily see. For example, the sequencing in which you pay for an Art of War and the missed Channel Lake Frigid, and the fact that it was the judge's decision to give the IP, a judge's decision that was brought upon by you calling the judge to investigate the game state and to make a ruling on it. Now, I do have a quote from Hayden. Hayden's very sick right now, and we wish him the best because I love this guy to death. He's I messaged him earlier, and he told me that he is knee deep in Ben and Jerry's triple fudge sundae ice cream, which is great. So I wish him a sturdy recovery. I love the guy to death. You love the guy to death. We all love the guy to death. And
I've known Hayden for over 15 years, all through Magic and stuff.
What?
He used to live in New Zealand. Yeah, he used to live in New Zealand. He ditched us and moved to Australia. It was a sad day.
Oh, wow. Okay, so here's a quote from Hayden, and I'm going to read this verbatim. Thanks for all the support. I do really appreciate it. I have unfortunately been sick getting home post the event, just catching up on socials now. But I wanted to say that both myself and Matt were playing at a pace to try and finish the game, as a draw would be tournament ending for both of us. I made a silly error by missing the CLF and gained an advantage. This was done in response to Matt playing Art of War. While I think the judge call could have been handled better, there was a lot going on. In the end, I certainly felt disadvantaged proportionally. This is what you're talking about, the IP, right?
Yeah.
But it was a complicated situation for the judges. Please, I ask people to consider what they are saying in response to this event, and I'll talk about it more on the pod this week. For now, I'm going to rest and recover from being sick. For what it's worth, I place most of the blame on myself for missing the CLF in the first place. Game was complicated and messy, and things happened beyond that. But ultimately, that's where it started, and I need to do better in the future to close out later rounds and events that I'm doing well in. That is from Hayden Dale. Obviously, Hayden is just a gem of a human being, and he takes a lot of the blame on this as well. And I do feel for him because, like you mentioned and like you explained it, an IP2 seems like if everybody gets an IP2, it's like, imagine it this way: if everybody gets taxed $1,000, some people won't feel it, and some people it'll ruin their whole life. Like, that's just the way. So equal punishment for both based on the state is a different story. And I completely understand that. And this is part of the conversation, which is maybe there needs to be ruling that is more specific to particular things, but that becomes such a tangled web of nonsense to a degree that, like, you don't want to touch it. I don't want to touch it either.
Yeah. That's the thing, right? Like, the whole thing felt gross and stuff, but I don't know a better way. The better way, the better way that I would have liked to have seen happen is just a rewind. But I think that when both players have gained an advantage, I think that the policy is to hand out IP penalties. It's such a tough one.
It is a tough one, and I do appreciate you again just being candid about it. And for all of those who may be wondering, when I reached out to Matt about it, he was the one who said, I really want to talk about this. So I want to give you credit for being the one who was beating the drum about clearing the air on this stuff. There is a particular aspect of your past that I feel is definitely worth discussing. And I think that this is going to lead, it's a good segue into what we're going to discuss after this, which is reputation and how that influences how people view you, your persona. Because Matt Rogers is Matt Rogers, the person, much like I'm, Matt DeMarco, the person living in my apartment and whatever. But to many others, you're a brand, a personality, an entity that is, trust me, it's so weird to think, But that is something that you also have to be cognizant of, is the fact that you have to keep integrity and reputation at heart. Now, you yourself came up to me and said, I want to talk about something that happened that I'm sure people will eventually find out, and you want to get ahead of this. So can you talk about this?
Yeah. So I think, like as you said, I think it's important that I just want to be honest and transparent over everything. People are trying to tear me down. People, and people are, and complete credit to them is somewhat justified. Like people are, I guess, questioning, right? Like people were questioning, my morals and my intent and everything like that. And I think it's just really important to just be honest and straight up about everything. And people are just going to make up their minds, however they do, right? And there are things that have happened, and there are things that have led to certain people in the past having certain stories and making certain accusations and exaggerations and all sorts of things. So I think it's better now that I'm straight up about everything, and that I just let people know the full story, and then I don't have to keep coming back and kind of explaining myself as people find out more things. I've played card games for almost 2 decades competitively. There are a lot of tournaments, and there are a lot of things, that I've played, and there are a lot of spots. You roll a D20 dice 500 times, you're going to get 20x number of times, right? Like inevitably things are going to happen. And some things do look bad and can look bad on your character. And so I just kind of wanted to be open about some things. So firstly, I was disqualified from a Magic event about 10 years ago. Now, there's a lot of emotions with this, but I'm going to try to just give the facts kind of go from there. So this was an event over in France, a Magic Grand Prix about 10 years ago, and I was playing about round 14 of the event. My opponent was playing for top 8. He could make top 8. I think I could not at this point, but we were playing the game, and it got to the final game of the match and way later on, and I had about 6 creatures in play, more than 10 lands in play, and I attacked in and flipped over my morph creature for lethal. So this was a limited event, basically attacked for lethal. At that point, my opponent put his hand up and called judge, and had a judge come over to the table and said to the judge, Matt didn't pay for that morph creature there. Like he didn't pay to cast it, 2 turns earlier or something. That I didn't tap mana, I didn't play it, whatever. And then at that time, his teammate, his friend that had been watching the game, piped up and said to the judge, yes, I am certain Matt didn't pay for that as well. I know this as well. It was all kind of a bit of a weird situation. And I was like, what? Like, what do you mean I didn't pay for it? I have 10 lands. Like I paid for it, and now I'm paying to flip it over and whatever. And the judge made us go through the last couple of turns. I went through the last couple of turns and said, I definitely played it earlier than the last couple of turns, but this is how much I can go through. There was a bit of an investigation, and they took each of us away from the table. I guess I should probably clarify that we were going through the turns away from the table. They took each of us away from the table and had us go back and kind of figure out turn by turn exactly what had happened. I could, I basically could not tell them when I cast it. I didn't know. I couldn't think that far back. I could go back through the first couple of turns, but that's as far, through the last 2 turns, but that's as far as I could get. There was way too much. It was too much of a complex game state. I was 14 rounds in and jet lagged, and my brain was too mush. I just couldn't do it. Whereas my opponent and his friend, it seems like they were able to go through and articulate, everything that happened way back, and be able to push their agenda that I hadn't paid for it. So so at this point, the head judge comes back to the table and takes me away from the table, and another judge packs up my stuff, and the head judge says to me, that simply, if I can't maybe packed up my stuff a little bit afterwards, but I saw that happening while I was talking to the head judge. So the head judge said to me that at this point, my opponent and his friends were so adamant and certain that I hadn't paid for this, and that I cheated or whatever. That she either had to believe them and DQ me, or believe me and DQ them, because in her mind, one of us is lying. And ultimately, she said that given all of the information they had, she believed that she was more than fit, that there was a more than 50% likelihood that they were telling the truth. And in that case, her belief was that and going through the policy is that it is better to DQ the player than let them carry on playing the event. So at that time, she told me that she was DQing me. It was 25 minutes past the end of the round. She said she needs to get the tournament moving, that a decision has to be made now, and that is ultimately her decision. So she disqualified me from the event. I wrote up a statement. The head judge wrote up a statement, it was really disheartening. I tried to stick to the facts, but obviously emotionally it was pretty hard. It was a pretty hard situation to have and hear. And that I feel that my opponent was playing for top 8, and I guess that was his out and whatever. But a few weeks after that event, a judge, a level 3+ judge on the board of the investigations committee, reached out to me and said that he would like to apologize on behalf of the judges for the situation and how it was handled and what happened. That they've done a bit of investigation, and that he felt really bad, and that he's sort of telling me, he felt on himself that he needed to reach out and apologize for the process and the judges, and ultimately the decision. Obviously, he wasn't there. He didn't make the decision. And because he wasn't there, he doesn't have the full information, but the information that he had was information from my statement, information from the head judge's statement. I'm gonna actually just read out word for word what he said to me, so that it's just straight facts, right? So word for word what he said to me in this bit was: shit happens, shit changed, but your DQ was looked at. You don't get a caution letter. You get a, we think the head judge fucked up, but we can't tell you that. GG, aka what you would want, because at the end of the day, the investigations committee wasn't there. We don't have all of the information, but we have made a decision based on what we have. And so, yes, it works out how you would want it to. You are vindicated. That's what, that's word for word what he said to me.
So this was a DQ at a Magic event wherein your opponent was facing lethal and potentially being bubbled out or knocked out of a top 8, which is a big deal in Magic, especially 10 years ago. Like, it was still like on fire back then. But ultimately, you were DQ'd for what was deemed a 50-50, right? Of one of you is selling
the judge specifically told me that she believed that there was more than a 50% chance that the other party was telling the truth.
Okay. Whoops. Okay. So there was that. And ultimately, upon investigation by another body that is above them, they essentially deemed that that was the incorrect call, and they exonerated you of whatever the transgression was, correct?
Yeah, I guess technically. Well, maybe not technically. I'm not sure because, he reached out not as part of the process, right? So as part of the process, they're supposed to, I think, investigate a DQ and then decide whether somebody gets banned or whether they get a cautionary letter. I got neither of those things. So they ultimately decided that I don't get a cautionary letter, I don't get a ban, and then he felt morally obligated and I guess obligated to kind of apologize on behalf of the crap situation that happened to me.
Okay, so you volunteered this obviously the story, this event that occurred in your card gaming history. I didn't ask for it, I didn't dig it up. You came to me and you said, I want to talk about this because I think that it's fair to talk about, because ultimately people might actually dig it up themselves and say, hey,
it's
look,
social media, right?
Well, it is, but
somebody's mentioned something to do with it, and people are going to dig. Eventually, I don't know if it would come out. I don't know if you can find out information on it, but ultimately, it's way better for me to just get everything on the table. I think, and just say, look, this is me. This is what's happened to me in my 2 decades of playing card games. If you believe that means I'm some, cheating scumbag or whatever, you're going to believe that. And if you don't, you're not,
So to quote the great Judge Judith Scheindlin, she said in an episode that I watched that stuck with me so long, for like 20 years. I don't know how long she's been on TV. I think she's been on TV for about 168 years. Long story short, she mentioned about how, somebody getting caught doing something is probably not the first time that they got caught, that it's a habit, that it just happens to be that way. So I think that there is certainly justification for people who might see an infraction like yours to look into a past, because habit is something that is very difficult to break. I mean, there's been discussions about other players in the Flesh and Blood community who may have, unfavorable game habits or gameplay and stuff like that. And that leads to reputation. And this is what I want to talk to you about. And I want to ask you a few questions. And the first one is, how important is reputation to you?
Yeah, I mean, reputation in the TCG industry is everything. It's my whole life. I have businesses in this industry. All of my, vast majority of my friends are related to this industry. This is my hobby as well. It's kind of my everything, my whole life. I have an amazing partner, and she's my love life and my personal life and everything there. And then everything else aside from that, aside from my family, is pretty much to do with card games. I live and breathe this stuff, right? So reputation is really, really important to me, and it's something that I can say this, and some people will believe it, and some people won't. But I would just never, ever, ever risk that reputation. And I think, on top of that, and how much my life has revolved around card games, I have such a high level of respect for card games. I have such a high level of respect for the game that, personally, I would never take a free win. I would never, basically cheat my way to a win in this game. It's just not, it's not in my nature. It's just not how it could ever work for me. I could never hold my head up high in this industry and never carry on in this industry with all my friends and all my everything around it if I was prepared to do that. That's just me saying that, and so, take it as you will, but ultimately that's how I feel.
I tend to agree. I tell people all the time, especially, in the card game industry, sure, but in my aspect of the card game industry, in the broadcast aspect, reputation is all you have. Like it's like you may have a demo reel that looks pretty badass and you might have a voice or whatever, that's fine. But if your reputation is garbage, like that is a death sentence. And it's
it's over. Especially if your reputation's like a cheater or something like that. You can just never show your face again. Like it's just over. So I think that like people that think that it would ever even be worth a 1% risk of getting caught or something like that to like cheat in a card game to win one round in a calling tournament or something like that. Like like the math just doesn't work out, right? Like even if you put all emotions and my character and everything aside, like the math just doesn't work. Like why would anybody risk that? You know what I mean? Like a calling win might seem like a really big thing, but I'm not as competitive in Fab as I used to be. Like, yeah, I'd love to win a calling, but I've got a calling trophy. It's not super, super important to me, and it's certainly not worth any sort of risk whatsoever on my reputation, you know?
So let me ask you this then. What do you believe your reputation is?
I think that like quite strongly through almost 2 decades of playing games, I think my reputation is that I am of high integrity, that I am honest, but that I can be a little bit harsh. So I guess I'll touch on that a little bit as well, that like I have earned a little bit of a reputation, especially in my early days of playing Magic, as being somebody that's quite competitive and quite harsh. There's definitely been spots in the past where I've gotten a bit of community hate and a bit of backlash or whatever because of my competitive nature and the fact that I've, basically like not allowed my opponents to take back a mistake, or you know they've missed something and it's happened and we've gone past it. But I think I also have a reputation of taking that on the chin myself as well, right? Like when I make a mistake, I make a mistake and I live with it, and I try to level head myself and get back in the game. I don't try to undo my mistake or anything like that. I own all of my mistakes, and there's a lot of them. I make the majority. Especially in Fab, the majority of the losses that I've sustained and playing Fab in the last while, since I've been less competitive, I've been playing way less. The majority of my losses are coming down to mistakes that I'm making. Like I was able to identify on board mistakes that I made that cost me each of my losses, like most of my losses in Worlds and most of my losses in Indianapolis a few weeks ago. Like almost all of those losses were to silly mistakes that had I been me from a year and a half ago and going hard with Fab and playing way more, those are mistakes I just wouldn't usually make. And I'm making a lot more of those now. And so ultimately they are costing me games. And that's why Michael Hamilton wins every event, right? Like that's why I'm not him, is because he is able to, you watch him play, he doesn't make the mistakes that I make, and that's why he wins every single event, because this game is that skill intensive. It is so much onto every single decision, and every single mistake changes quite a bit of the game, right? So for me and from my perspective, my strength in this game is overall strategy, right? Like I'm not the best technical player. And I don't get enough reps to get all of the technical spots right and to be able to play at speed without making a mistake. I just don't get those reps anymore. So where I win the games and where I do quite well is the overall strategy, which I still think, even to this day, I am one of the better players at, is understanding exactly where the game's going, based on how many red power cards my opponents have used or in their graveyard, plus how many they've pitched. I'm really good at strategizing the game around the end game and kind of thinking 5 or 6 turns ahead and what's going to happen there and how I'm going to, kind of overrun them and at what points I need to pivot, right? So like I think what I understand really well is knowing exactly where their deck density is at in terms of red cards, in terms of power cards, in terms of what they can do to me, and pivoting based on that information. So what you'll often see from me in my games is I'll take quote unquote really low value trades at certain spots in the game where people are like, why would he not block there, or why would he do this or whatever? Like, that doesn't really make sense. Like, there's no value in that. I will do that at certain points of the game to pivot something over to play out my game plan that I've come up with of how I'm going to win this game and how I'm going to pivot around and overthrow you and everything like that. So that's my strength in the game. That's something I learned in the early days of the game, and that's what I lean on now. And ultimately, I accept the fact that I'm going to make, play mistakes. I'm going to make silly little mistakes that most competitive players that are playing a lot of fab won't make. But I just have to accept that and roll with it, and just know that at the end of the day, I'm playing this game as a hobby. I'm not, completely dedicating all my time and efforts to winning a pro tour or anything anymore. I step back from that. I focus on other things. This is a hobby that I am doing for fun with a bunch of mates, and I love being competitive, and I love playing competitive card games.
So this sort of then kind of just, it leads to this other question, which is things like angle shooting and sharking, and that in rule sharking, and that's an aspect and I guess the first thing is to explain what angle shooting and rule sharking is. It's trying to gain an advantage based on enforcing little tidbits of rules that you might take liberties with that you're not giving your opponent necessarily the same liberties with. That's, I guess, my own personal definition of it. Everybody probably has their own vision of it. Some people view you as an angle shooter or a rule sharker. And you're mentioning that, maybe a year and a half ago, even 10 years ago, the competitive Matt Rogers in these tournaments wants every advantage to win. And at what degree is that okay? And at what degree are you perhaps still, maybe taking some of those avenues? And I'm not saying that it's the right thing or the wrong thing. That's not the question. The question here is, are you still doing that? Have you done it? And what is your response to those who view you particularly as that type of player in order to gain a means of advantage?
Yeah, so I'm definitely a lot softer now in my old age than I was in my younger years of Magic. But I guess on your definition of that and of sharking, I don't think I qualify. I think that ultimately I'm harsh and I'm competitive. Like in a competitive game, if you don't Snapdragon your attack, in the reaction step, and you get that information from me about whether I'm going to react to it or not, and then we go to damage, like, I'm probably not going to let you take it back. And ultimately, like, that is just kind of how it works. But at the same time, like, multiple times this weekend, my opponents attacked me and I was going to ice react them. And then I went, okay, I take 3. And then I was like, wait, oh crap, I was going to ice, I'm thinking to myself, I was going to ice react you. Now, me in that spot, I take the lick. I just say, look, I'm going to lose a whole card. I'm just going to go to my turn. I didn't ice react. That is what that is. I've missed my window, so I lose out. And that's part of the game, because ultimately, like, these are the mistakes, right? Like, that's what I'm saying about, like, my mistakes at Worlds costing me games, my mistakes in Indy costing me games. Like, a mistake is any sort of bad decision that you made, any sort of decision at any point that wasn't optimal, right? So if my opponent makes a decision against me that's not optimal, and then they realize a better line after they've made it and after it's done, if I let them take back everything like that, like, they would just win, like, far, far more. You know what I mean? Like, if I got to take back everything like that, maybe I'd be Michael Hamilton. I don't know. Like,
he will kill you before you become him.
I'm able to, I'm able to realize where I lose, just, the vast majority of the games I lose through mistakes I've made, right? So, like, that is a huge part of the game, is that if you don't make those mistakes, you win those games. So so I think ultimately, I mean, I do let people take things back now a bit here and there. I am a bit softer than I used to be, but sometimes I'm harsh as well. And I think end of the day, like, attacking somebody's character over that isn't really fair, because I take my licks too. If I make a mistake, I've made a mistake.
So first of all, thank you again for talking about this. I was going to sort of cut it shorter earlier so we can discuss the meta, but I don't think that anybody cares about that right now. I mean, we can discuss, we might have, maybe we do a follow-up episode like, down the line, but the reality is I've got Charlotte this weekend. And after that, we've got brand new cards coming out, which is equally as exciting. And pre-release weekend, I'm signed up for a bunch of those. That's going to be super cool. But, this was the crux of the discussion, and it took up the entirety. In fact, we blew past time by a lot, and I do appreciate, again, your candor on this and all this. But I do want to say something, and this is not directed at you. It's not directed at the people listening. It's not directed necessarily at this particular situation. It's just in general, for everybody. And it's this. If we are judging people based off of a mistake that they made, that they have made an attempt to atone for and to make right, that is not progress. That is not a good way to do it. You're only going to collect grudges and hate throughout this journey. And you can call me naive and you can call me whatever, but you know what? I live a happy life and I have good friends, and nobody's perfect. And that's what I'm trying to get at. Do not judge people for the mistakes that they've made, that they have made efforts to atone for. You have to give people that option, because nobody is going to live a perfect life. And that goes for everything beyond the card table. And in this case, specifically at the card table, because when I'm playing Talishar and practicing for 4 hours a day, I make an ass load of mistakes, and I want to be held to the same fire that, for instance, you are, because I aspire to be as good as you. I aspire to be as good as Michael Hamilton, as Brody Spurlock, as Hayden Dale, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But through that, I will make mistakes. Just as you said, you yourself, you are trying to improve, and you are trying to get better as a player. And through that, if you were making zero mistakes, Matt Rogers, you would not need to improve, because you would already be perfect. And in that regard, if you are held to the fire for every mistake that you made, then that entire conversation is unfair for card players and for every other scenario that's out there. People will make mistakes. I make tons of them. You who's listening out there, you've probably made 7 mistakes just loading up this podcast. It is what it is. But what I'm trying to appeal to people is be kind to one another and understand that there is more to it than rumor and speculation. I'm not a judge in this matter. I am merely somebody who wanted to give a friend of mine a platform to explore. And I feel like I asked you some pretty hard questions. And ultimately, I know that there are going to be people out there who listen to this and are not satisfied, because they want to hear is that they want to hear Matt Rogers come on the show and say, yeah, I messed up Hayden and screw that guy and all this other stuff, and I totally got him, and I'll do it again. Now, that's a ridiculous thing to say, that you would never do that. Ultimately, maybe that's all part of your master plan, you evil genius. But ultimately, I think that it's important for people to understand that intent and execution are sometimes don't align, and that is an important differential. That's an important difference that people need to isolate and understand. Nobody's perfect, so let's just all try to help each other out and improve. And that's kind of how I want to wrap that up.
Yeah, I do also just kind of want to add that, I agree with that 100%. The whole social media thing and like putting expectation on players, like the amount of expectation I feel that people put on me, to play perfectly and to play these games and stuff, when I'm just not. I'm not putting in the practice, I'm not putting in the work that I would need to put in to live up to those expectations. It's impossible. And I think we all need to think about that a little bit more, and a little bit about how much expectations we put on players as a whole, and just say, well, they're top players. They win these big events. Like, they should be playing, they shouldn't be making these mistakes. Like, that's just not how it works. There is far too much information in this game. This game is far too complex. if you keep putting expectations on these top players to perform, like you're going to burn them out. And they're gonna resent the spotlight, and they're gonna decline feature matches, and they're gonna potentially quit the game and stuff. And we don't want that. We love watching players and following players like Hayden Dale and like Michael Hamilton and everything like that. And it's such an important and amazing part of this game. But if we keep doing this and we keep attacking them for any minor error that they make, it's not going to be worth it for them at the end of the day. And ultimately, we're going to lose something really, really special.
That's true for everybody. I mean, look at this. Look at Hayden Dale. Hayden Dale, you can't look like that and be a perfect fab player. That would just be unfair. That is absolutely criminal at that rate. So ultimately, again, I just want to wish Hayden a swift recovery, because I know that he's not feeling well. So Matt,
this is exactly why you're not that great at fab, right?
Oh, you son of a bitch. I caught that one.
Backhanded compliment. Boom.
Got it. I'm so good looking that I suck so hard at this game. Noted. I will absolutely double down on that. Okay, so we do have the Go Again segment, which is the, this was pretty candid as well, but it will allow you to swear even more and without quotations. But ultimately, I think that in that Go Again segment, we'll dig into PCG grading. We'll dig into a little bit of the meta as well as some of those questions answered. But for the rest of the episode, Matt, where can we find you on social media? I know that I poke you all the time to get your stupid ass on Twitter more often. Maybe not this week, though.
I want to get off Twitter. Yeah. I'm like setting some boundaries for myself, because usually I check Twitter like once a week, right? But throughout all this stuff that's going on, I'm like looking at it multiple times a day, and it's not healthy for me at all. So I'm trying to set myself some more boundaries and doing Twitter less and replying to people less, because it's opening up some more cans, and it's just. It's a lot of time, and I'm a very emotional person, so it's a lot of it puts a lot of strain, just kind of on my thinking in general, and I end up going round and round and round in my head, and it's not good. Look, Facebook's the main place I hang out. I don't want to kind of go much beyond that. It's not for me. Social media is for some people, and that they get a lot out of it, and that they get to create a platform and everything. It's not really for me. I'm on Facebook. I look at most things on the Flesh and Blood fan page. I love that. That's just an area of mostly positivity that everybody kind of hangs out and just talks about the things that they love about Flesh and Blood. So I'm on there. I'll be putting a spoiler video up on there for outsiders as well. I'm really excited about that. I'm recording that tonight. My content comes out on Channel 5 mostly. I do Fab with Matt each month, so that comes out. I'm always happy to engage with people over there. Any comments that you ask and stuff about that, specifically on the fan page on Facebook, more than happy to always answer that and talk about that and talk about Fab. I would say probably don't try to reach me on whatever any of the other ones are, Discord, TikTok, whatever. It's not my jam. I'm on Facebook every day, and I'm on Twitter maybe once a week.
All right. Well, we're still trying to revive MySpace, but we're way past that. Matt, thank you so much for doing Instant Speed as always. You're a champion, brother. I do appreciate you, and I hope that you play cleaner, so I don't have to have this conversation again.
No, fair enough. Honestly, I really, really appreciate you inviting me to come on and giving me the chance to kind of say my piece and give my side of the story. Because obviously people have such limited information without audio, just kind of watching cards and everybody, all sorts of people piece things together themselves, right? So I really do appreciate you giving me my side. And I think the other thing that people have to kind of realize is that some people do have agendas. Obviously I own businesses, I have competitors, I've dealt with that plenty of times in the past, as there are people, especially over this side of the world, that gain something about pulling my integrity into question. And that has happened a lot throughout my TCG years, and it still continues to happen. So I would just invite people to look at the facts. There's a lot of rumors. And I know a lot of people have, perfectly valid reasons to question everything. And they hear, some of these rumors and things from sources that they believe, but you have to understand, from very reputable sources, but you have to understand that those sources have probably heard it from somebody else, has probably heard it from someone else. And Chinese whispers, things always get exaggerated for drama, or people try to spin things. So stick to the facts, enjoy the game with mates. And I think everybody just, let's all just chill out and just enjoy flesh and blood and enjoy each other. And yeah.
I love it. I'm going to take this video straight to my local news station and be like, hey, mofos,
Oh my God.
Audition tape. Let's go. Let's go. All right, friends. Well, thank you so much to our sponsors at Kayfabe Cards. Go to kayfabecards.com for sealed and single products, as well as BCW Supplies. You can get all your protection stuff at bcwsupplies.com. Use the code ISB10, 10% off all of your purchases. And of course, to our Patreon subscribers, you guys are wicked cool. And if you are a Patreon Tier 2 Plus subscriber, you can then go check out the Go Again segment, where Matt Rogers is going to talk meta, PCG grading, and ice cream sundaes. I don't know.
Fun stuff. Yes.
Yeah, we'll get to the fun stuff. All right, friends, thank you so much. Don't forget, you're not losing if you're learning, so keep playing the game. You might win. We'll catch you next time on ISP.